It was a Tuesday morning. Nothing extraordinary about it, just the hum of the coffee maker, the chill of bare feet on tile, and the quiet ache of a woman standing alone in her kitchen, staring at her phone. He hadn't called. Again. And this time she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She didn't chase. Instead, she whispered a quiet prayer. The kind that comes not from your lips, but from somewhere deep in your bones. God, I can't keep choosing someone who doesn't choose me. That was the day she chose God over a man. Not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but out of something sacred, self-worth. And not just surface-level, scripted, highlight reel kind of love. I'm talking about the kind of love that sees you on your worst day, crying in the car, spiraling in self-doubt, wrestling with the same wounds you swore you'd healed, and doesn't flinch, the kind that stays, that softens. That says, I still choose you, even now. That desire is so human. It's baked into us, to want someone to hold us close and mean it. To want arms we can collapse into, not because we're weak, but because we've been strong for too long. We want to be chosen, not out of convenience or loneliness, but because someone looks at us and says, you. Only you. But what happens when that kind of love doesn't show up? What happens when you pour your heart into someone, and it just drips right through their hands? You find yourself second, guessing everything. Maybe if I didn't speak up so much. Maybe if I didn't get emotional. Maybe if I was easier to love. That's the lie loneliness tells us, that we're too much to handle and not enough to stay for. And so, in the name of love, we start shrinking. We minimize our needs, silence our instincts, settle for unanswered text and half-hearted affection. We convince ourselves, this is better than being alone. But can I tell you the truth? There's a loneliness that cuts deeper than being alone. It's the loneliness of lying next to someone who doesn't know how to hold your heart. It's the loneliness of pretending everything's fine just so they won't leave. It's the ache of realizing you're in love with someone who only ever met the version of you that made them comfortable. And it takes immense bravery, soul, deep, spine, tingling bravery, to say, this isn't love, not the kind I need, not the kind I deserve. We grow up thinking that love is about holding on. But sometimes, real love, the holy kind, the healing kind, is what happens when you finally let go. So when she stood in that kitchen, staring at her phone, heart thudding like a quiet drum of disappointment, she knew she had a choice. Keep choosing someone who left her empty or choose herself. Choose peace. Choose God. Because real love, the kind that changes you, never asks you to become invisible just to be seen. Some people will love you conditionally. They won't say it out loud, but you'll feel it in your bones. I love you when you're easy. I love you as long as you don't make me uncomfortable. I love you until you ask for too much. And when you're in it, when you care deeply for someone, you make excuses for it. You tell yourself, he's just going through something. He doesn't mean to shut me out. Maybe I am asking for too much. But the truth is, when someone's love depends on your silence, your stillness, your self-sacrifice, it isn't love. It's control dressed up as connection. And control will always ask you to shrink. But God does the opposite. God doesn't ask you to shrink. God asks you to expand. God calls you into a love that stretches you wide. Into grace, into growth, into truth. Not a love that clips your wings, but one that teaches you to fly even when the world tells you to stay small. There's something profoundly sacred about choosing a love that doesn't require you to disappear. It's not about being alone. It's about being aligned. There's a story I carry in my heart. A woman I once met after a talk I gave. She was quiet, polite, her eyes scanning the floor like it held all the answers. After everyone had left, she walked up to me and whispered, I left him after 11 years. I thought staying made me faithful. But I realized I was faithful to a version of myself God never asked me to be. Her voice shook when she said it. But her soul didn't, because she knew, somewhere deep inside her, that God had never once required her to betray herself in order to be a good woman. She had confused endurance with holiness. She had called suffering sacrifice. But what she really needed was permission to breathe again. You see, choosing God over a man doesn't mean you're rejecting love. It means you're choosing a truer love. one that doesn't keep score, one that doesn't make you earn rest, one that doesn't get threatened by your healing. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet, like when your soul finally exhales, like when you wake up one morning and realize, I am not too much. I was just with someone who couldn't hold all of me. Sometimes it looks like lighting a candle in your room, sitting cross-legged in pajamas that don't match, and whispering a simple prayer, God, I want more. I don't even know what it looks like, but I want more than this. And God, in all his gentleness, will whisper back, you were made for more than this. Not because the man was evil or cruel or even unloving, but because you've outgrown the place where you had to beg to be seen. Choosing God over a man is not an act of defiance. It's an act of devotion to your worth, to your spirit, to the sacredness inside of you that refuses to live a life that is small just so someone else can feel big. So if your heart is whispering, this isn't it, know that God hears you. And he's not asking you to stay where you keep losing pieces of yourself just to keep someone else whole. Let's not sugarcoat it. Letting go hurts. There's a particular kind of grief that wraps itself around your chest when you finally walk away from someone you once believed was your person. It's not just the absence of them. Their laugh, their scent, the way they used to reach for your hand in the car. It's the absence of the future you imagined with them. The inside jokes that won't be told anymore. The vacations that won't be taken. The dinner tables that won't be shared. Letting go of someone you loved is not a clean break. It's 1,000 tiny goodbyes, and most of them are silent. You'll find yourself walking through the grocery store and grabbing his favorite coffee without thinking. You'll roll over in bed and instinctively reach for someone who's no longer there. You'll hear a song and feel the ground shift beneath you because it sounds like the summer you fell in love. That's grief. But not all grief means regret. Sometimes, grief is just love with nowhere to go. And here's the brutal truth we don't often say out loud. You can miss someone deeply and still know they're not good for you. You can ache for their presence and still choose your peace. You can cry over the ending and still be proud of the decision. Because emotional maturity is not about never hurting. It's about learning to sit with the hurt without rushing back to what broke you. I remember a woman who once told me, it took me years to leave him. And when I did, I felt like I'd torn something sacred. But now I realize what was sacred wasn't the relationship. It was me. And I had been tearing myself for years just to keep it alive. That stopped me in my tracks. Because we're taught that grief is a sign we should go back. That maybe we gave up too soon. But often grief is the price of freedom. It's the body catching up to the soul's decision to move on. And when you choose God over a man, the grief doesn't disappear. If anything, it may feel heavier at first, because you're choosing something invisible, eternal, unshackable. You're choosing faith when your heart wants familiarity, and that kind of courage. It's not flashy. It's not posted on Instagram. It's the quiet kind. The kind no one applauds. But it is sacred. God honors the grief that comes from choosing what's right over what's comfortable. He doesn't rush you through the process. He doesn't say, you should be over this by now. He sits with you in the ashes. And in that stillness, when you've cried the same prayer for the 10th night in a row, something changes. It's subtle. But you feel it. Your grief starts to soften. Your breathing steadies. You laugh, not the full kind yet, but a small spark. And it surprises you. And that's when you know you're healing. You may not feel whole yet, but you're no longer empty. You may not see the full picture, but you know you're walking away from the lie that love should hurt this much. And that's when you realize, this grief, it's not punishment, it's a passage. It's what you walk through to get to the other side of yourself. A woman who's not just strong, but whole. Not just faithful, but free. Not just moving on, but coming home. Real love never makes you beg. And yet, how many of us have found ourselves quietly pleading in the corners of our hearts, hoping someone would just see us? Not the curated, easy-to-love version, the real us. The one who gets anxious when texts go unanswered. The one who overthinks silence. The one who shows up deeply, who loves hard, who needs reassurance, who cries sometimes for reasons even she doesn't fully understand. We don't ask for too much, we ask for honesty. for safety, for presence. And still, we're made to feel like those needs are too heavy, too inconvenient, too intense. So what do? We start to shrink. We hold back our truth because we don't want to push him away. We tell ourselves we're okay with less, even when our soul is starving. We trade depth for attention, intimacy for attachment, and we call it love. But love, real love, doesn't punish you for being human. It doesn't weaponize your vulnerability. It doesn't get silent when you need words. It doesn't call you too emotional when you express what you feel. If love only shows up when you're agreeable and disappears when you're in pain, it's not love, it's approval. And approval is fleeting. It demands you perform for connection. And when you perform long enough, you forget who you really are underneath the mask. You were not created to audition for someone's affection. You were not born to be small just to fit inside someone else's limited idea of what's lovable. God never asks you to earn love. God is love. And his love doesn't wait for you to be perfect or convenient. It meets you in the middle of the mess and says, "You are still mine." I once sat across from a woman who told me, I stopped asking for anything at all, because every time I did, he'd withdraw. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, he'd love me again. Her voice cracked, and then she said the most heartbreaking thing. I thought needing nothing made me strong, but strength is not silence. Strength is honesty. It's standing in your truth, trembling and tear-streaked, and saying, "This is what I need. And I won't pretend anymore that I don't." There is a moment, and maybe you felt it, where something in you breaks, but in the most liberating way. You stop waiting for the bare minimum to feel like a miracle. You stop confusing longing with loyalty. You stop mistaking survival for love. And you begin to ask different questions. Not, how can I get him to stay? But why am I staying where I constantly feel unseen? Not, what did I do wrong? But why do I keep blaming myself for someone else's inability to love deeply? And in those questions, you begin to see the truth. You were never too much. You were just in a place that required you to be less. That's when the real shift begins. You start to see your sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a superpower. You realize your need for connection, depth, and emotional safety is not a flaw. It's your wiring, your God-given design. And you start making different choices. You stop settling for situations where you have to suppress your heart just to keep someone around. You walk away from people who can't meet you where you are. Not because you're bitter, but because you're finally brave. You begin to protect your peace the way you once protected the relationship. You choose presence over promises, truth over tension, and faith over fear, because you finally understand God never created you to beg for love. He created you to embody it. And when you live in that kind of wholeness, your spirit becomes the kind of place where only the real can stay. So if you're in that between, no longer there but not quite healed, hold on. You are not being punished for wanting more. You're being prepared for it. And the love that's coming, the kind rooted in truth, in faith, in fullness, won't need you to shrink to be worthy of it. It will recognize you as worthy from the start. There is something breathtaking about a woman who finally sees herself clearly, not through the cracked lens of someone else's opinion, not through the filter of past rejections or failed relationships, but through the eyes of the one who made her. She is not loud. She is not trying to prove anything. She is not performing to be loved. She is simply whole. You can feel it in the way she walks into a room, not demanding attention, but radiating something deeper, peace. There's no desperation, no ache to be chosen, no need to explain or defend her softness, her strength, her solitude. Because when a woman chooses God over a man, she stops asking the world to define her worth. She no longer sees herself as half of a whole. She is no longer waiting for someone else to complete her story. She is the story, a living, breathing, walking miracle of redemption. She knows what it feels like to give her heart away and get nothing in return. She knows the sting of being forgotten, of being almost loved, of being nearly enough. But she also knows the moment she let go, not just physically, but spiritually. The day she said, "I don't need him to come back to feel worthy again." The day she stopped building altars to people who only ever prayed for her inconvenience. The day she finally understood she wasn't abandoned, she was redirected. And that redirection? It wasn't punishment. It was protection. God was pulling her out of a shallow connection to place her in the deep waters of divine intimacy. That kind of woman is a force, not because she's loud or unshakable, but because she is anchored. She has cried in her bathroom. She has screamed into her pillow. She has journaled prayers that felt like begging. And through all of it, she has come to know the only arms that never let her fall. She is not hard. She is not guarded. She is open, but with boundaries, loving, but discerning, available, but not desperate. Her identity is no longer wrapped up in who texts back, who stays, who notices. She is rooted in something so much stronger than validation. She is rooted in truth, and truth whispers to her in the quiet, "You are chosen. You are beloved. You are enough," even when no one says it out loud. You are the daughter of a God who doesn't play games with your heart, who doesn't dangle affection like a reward for good behavior, who doesn't disappear when things get messy. So she wakes up with purpose. She prays with boldness. She laughs again, not because life is perfect, but because her soul is free. She no longer asks, "Am I lovable?" She asks, "Is this love worthy of me?" She doesn't chase love, she becomes it. She becomes the kind of presence that softens rooms and silences shame. The kind of woman whose peace makes people wonder where her strength comes from. And the answer is always the same. It comes from God. She's no longer interested in a love that costs her peace, her voice, her joy. She knows what she carries is holy, and she treats herself like someone who deserves to be honored. This isn't about pride. It's about dignity. It's about walking away from people who only love the idea of her and making space for the ones who can love her in reality. And if no one else shows up, she's still okay, because she knows now she is never walking alone. Her heart is held, her worth is sealed, her story is sacred. She is the woman who chose God, and in doing so, she found everything. So, to the woman sitting in her own silence today, maybe holding back tears, maybe holding her breath, here's what I want you to know: choosing God over a man doesn't make you hard. It makes you whole. You are not behind. You are not too much. You are not forgotten. You are becoming the woman who doesn't settle for crumbs because she finally believes she's worthy of the feast. So breathe, grieve, heal, rise. And when the ache returns, because it will, remember you didn't walk away from love, you walked toward it. And that is a story worth telling. That is a life worth living.